Hello and welcome to PA Academy. So in this video you are going to be learning about dependent sources. So just like you can see on the screen, we are going to be looking at these four different types of dependent sources, what they are, and then we are going to explain further. So if that interests you, do make sure you watch the video to the end. And if you are new to the channel, please can take out time to subscribe to the channel. So you will see the subscribe button just below the video. So you can just take out these 2 seconds to subscribe. Alright, so thank you very much if you have just done that. Alright, now so let's look at the four that you can see on the screen. So now we have the voltage dependent voltage source, we have the voltage dependent current source, current dependent voltage source, and then current dependent current source. Now this thing might want to look confusing to you because of the way it is arranged, but one thing you need to understand here is that just look at the last two things here. That will also help you. So for this is voltage source, voltage source, current source. Exactly. So for you to be able to know the four of them conveniently without mixing everything up, just know that we are dealing with two sources. It's either it is a current source or a voltage source. Exactly. So if it is a voltage source, exactly, then you can now say that, okay, for every voltage source, so it can either be a voltage dependent or current dependent. Exactly. Also, if it is a current source, then you also have to just know that it's either a voltage dependent or a current dependent. Exactly. So that's how you can just permutate it to get the four different types of dependent sources. I hope that makes sense. So now let's look at each of these sources one after the other. So starting with the first one that we have on the screen here, we are having a voltage dependent voltage source. Exactly. So now let's look at it. A voltage dependent voltage source. So if you are to analyze it, that means we are dealing with a voltage source. Exactly. We are dealing with what? A voltage source. What makes that voltage source different is that it is voltage dependent. What simply means is that means we have a particular voltage source. Looking at this diagram now, we have a particular voltage source whose value depends on another voltage. Exactly. So that means a voltage source whose value depends on another voltage. That's why we have a voltage dependent voltage source. Now let me use this circuit that we have on the screen to explain the concept of a voltage dependent voltage source. So it's not in all cases that you have a circuit like this, but if you can understand it using this circuit, I believe you'll be fine even if you come across different type of circuits. Now this is just a rough sketch of the circuit. You can see we have a 2 ohms resistor here, 3 ohms, 4 ohms, which doesn't actually matter. But the important thing is that we have two voltage sources here. It could be more than two. Like I said, it could just be any circuit. Now take a look at this particular circuit now. Okay, so let me take out some of these things. Now look at this circuit now. The value of the voltage here at this point here, I gave it, I just looked at what x naught volts. That means we don't actually know the voltage here. And then if you look at this one on this side here, on the left side here, so let's say the value is 3x naught volts. Exactly. So now if you are to analyze it based on what we are talking about, a voltage dependent voltage source, that means this one here is the voltage dependent voltage source. And why? Because the value of this voltage here depends on what? On these 3 knots. It is depending on this one here. Is the value of the voltage here. So let me say the value of the voltage at V1 depends on the value of the voltage at what? At V2. So what that means is that if after calculation or maybe the question you are given that said that, okay, take your S naught to be 4 volts. That means if, let's say the question says our S naught is equals to 4 volts. So that means our X naught is 4 volts. Exactly. So that means the voltage here at our V1 would then be 3 times 4 volts, and that will just give us 12. So what does that mean? That means if S naught changes to 5, that means our V1 will change to 5 times 3, which is 15. So you can see that the value of the voltage source here is depending on the value of X naught here. So that means we can call it a voltage dependent voltage source. Exactly. So the value of this voltage is depending on what? Another voltage. Are we good? So that's it. Now let's go to the next one. So next one is voltage dependent current source. Alright, so for this now, which is a voltage dependent current source, that means we have a current source whose value depends on what? On a particular voltage, maybe within the circuit. Exactly. So now let me just draw, just like the other circuit that we have. So it could just be any circuit. So let me just have this. So now that means we have a current source. So let me just put the current source here. So let me just assume a random direction. Then let me put the voltage here. Let me just add the voltage here. Another voltage source here. So let's just assume this direction exactly. So now the value of the resistor could be anything. So 3 ohms and then 4 ohms. So a voltage dependent current source. That means we have a current source whose value depends on what? On the voltage. Exactly. So in that case, so let's assume that at this point we're having a voltage source of, let's say, 3 volts. And then that means here we are going to be having our current source to be, or don't let us do it that way. Let's just write it here that our voltage here is, let's also call this S0. Exactly. And that means our current here can be, let's just say maybe 2x0 amperes. Exactly. So this is a typical example of a voltage dependent current source. And what was that saying? That means the current source that we are having in this particular circuit, this current here, the current source, the real value of it depends on the value of the voltage that we are having here. Are we good? Just like previous example. So that means if the voltage here is, let's say, 2 volts, so that means our S0 is equals to 2 volts. That means the current that we are going to be having on this side will be what? 4. That is 2 times S0. Exactly. So that means the value of our current source depends on the value of the voltage here. So that makes it a voltage dependent current source. Exactly. That means a voltage dependent current source. So with these two examples, I want to believe by now you're already getting the concept of dependent sources. So now let's quickly look at the third one. We're having what? A current dependent voltage source. For this also, let me just quickly draw a simple circuit so that we can use to analyze what this is also talking about. Alright, so this is just a simple circuit to explain it. So now we have a current source here. Let me just put this direction here. And then the value of this current source is, we are giving it y naught. Okay, this is a current, so this should be amperes. Y naught amperes. And then here we are having a voltage source on this side. And then we are giving it 3 y naught volts. Exactly. So this is how you are going to find this in almost all cases now. So since we are dealing with a current dependent voltage source, exactly. So this is a voltage source whose value is depending on what? On this current source. Are we good? So that means if we have the value of this current here to be, if our y naught is 3 amperes, exactly. So that means our voltage source here will be 3 times 3, which will be 9 volts. So if our current source here changes maybe from 3 volts to, let's say maybe we are having 3 amperes to 5 amperes. Exactly. That means our voltage source here will be 3 times 5, and that will be 15 volts. You can see. So that means the value of this voltage source here is actually depending on the current that we are having here. So that makes it a current dependent voltage source. So all of these dependent sources that we are talking about, you find them a lot when you are dealing with maybe circuit theory, or generally when you come across circuit generally, you see them a lot. So now to look at before we go to the last one, if you are finding value in the video, please give it a thumbs up. And like I said at the beginning, if you are yet to subscribe, please, you'll find subscribe button just below this, goes below your screen. You will see this option to subscribe. So just click on that subscribe. So now with what we've said in the first, the second, and the third dependent sources. Now we are in the last one, which is the fourth one, which is a current dependent source. So kindly pause the video and try to just do a rough sketch of what you think a current dependent current source would be, and just give it a definition based on the explanation we've given earlier on the other dependent sources. So again, let's use this circuit to explain it. So that means for a current dependent current source, that means we have a current source whose value depends on another current. source, exactly, or another current value within that circuit. Okay, so now let's look at this now. So if you look at this circuit, we have this source here and we have this source here. So which one do you think is the dependent source, and which one do you think is the independent source? Okay, so whatever your guess is, so this that we are having right here is the independent, source, while this is the dependent source. Exactly. So that means this right here, this 4m naught, the value of this 4m naught actually depends on what? On the value of the m naught you're having here. So if this our value of m naught is taken to be, let's say, 2 amperes, exactly, so that means for what we are having here, we are going to be having 4 times 2, which is going to be 8 amperes. So basically, this is what current dependent current source is. That means you're having a current source whose value is depending on another current within the network or the circuit. Exactly. So with that, I hope you've been able to understand the 4 different dependent sources that we talked about in this video. So if you are still confused about it, I would just encourage you to go ahead and watch the video over again and try to understand the basic difference. It is very simple and pretty straightforward. Exactly. So I hope you find value in this. If you find value, please give it a thumbs up. And if you have any question or doubts, do let me know in the comment section below. So with that, I will see you all in the next video. Thank you.